just 8 years old, loved acting and devoured storybooks in his free time. But his life wasn't as simple as the tales he read. Every day, the school bus dropped him off at an empty house. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Jabari, were doctors, dedicated to their work at the hospital, leaving Auden to navigate the loneliness of an empty mansion after school. With little time to spare for him, his parents' absence felt like a constant in his young life. He'd spend hours waiting for them to return, and sometimes he found himself lost in thoughts of the stories he read, wishing they could be part of his reality. Auden sat curled up on the edge of the couch, his small hands clutching his knees. As evening shadows crept into the corners of the room, he broke into quiet sobs. "I'm so scared staying here all by myself," he confessed, his voice trembling as tears streaked down his cheeks. Mrs. Jabari froze at her son's words. Her heart clenched as guilt washed over her. She had always prided herself and her husband on giving Eden everything he needed: a grand mansion to live in, toys to play with, and a life of comfort. Yet they had failed to notice how much their absence had weighed on him. Tears filled her eyes, mirroring her son's anguish. "I promise, I'll do something about it." Auden nodded weakly, but deep inside, he wished for more than her words. Uncle Frank had just completed his National Youth Service Corps (NYSC) program and was now on the lookout for a job. In his late 20s, Frank was a tall, handsome bachelor whose cheerful demeanor made him well-loved by everyone he met. Despite his good looks, no one had ever seen him with a romantic partner, which made him somewhat of an enigma. Uncle Frank arrived at the Jabari mansion the next day. Auden was overjoyed. Though they were far apart in age, it felt as though Auden had found his long-lost playmate. The once melancholy boy, who would slump off the school bus each afternoon, now rushed home with a gleam in his eyes, eager for the adventures that awaited him. "How was school today, Aiden? Come on, let's play," Uncle Frank would call out with a wide smile. Frank seemed to know exactly what Aiden needed. He cooked meals that warmed not just Aiden's stomach, but also his heart, and he entertained him with drama skits, playing out imaginative stories as if they were actors on a grand movie set. Auden, who loved stories more than anything, couldn't get enough of these lively sessions. Uncle Frank didn't stop there. He brought Auden fun games and let him scroll through his phone to watch his favorite movies. On weekends, he took the boy to the cinema to see the latest children's films, an experience Auden cherished deeply. Though the Jabaris were affluent and could afford to spoil their son, it wasn't the material gifts that mattered to Auden. It was Uncle Frank's unwavering attention and care. For the first time, Auden felt truly seen. Uncle Frank, too, found a special joy in Auden's company. The boy's innocent enthusiasm, his wide-eyed wonder at the smallest things, and the way he ran to hug Frank whenever he came home began to fill a void in Frank's life. As their bond deepened, Frank became increasingly drawn to the way Auden looked up to him with such trust and admiration. Yet, beneath Frank's bright smiles and playful demeanor, something else stirred, a growing fascination with Auden that he couldn't quite name or understand. One afternoon, after a long day at school, Auden returned home filled with excitement. He had just taken a refreshing shower and was about to enjoy a hearty lunch when Uncle Frank approached him with an unexpected gift: a phone. Eagerly, Auden accepted, thrilled to have his own device. However, as he began to explore, he found something disturbing. The gallery was cluttered with inappropriate videos, and the search bar displayed searches that a child should never encounter. Uncle Frank observed quietly from a corner of the sitting room, a cunning glint in his eye. He leaned in, enticing Auden into a sinister game that blurred the lines between reality and deception. To Auden, who had created a special place in his heart for Uncle Frank, there was an innocent trust that would soon be exploited. "Don't you want to be a superhero one day?" Uncle Frank asked, his voice soothing yet manipulative. "This is all part of your training. You must take it seriously." What began as acting under the guise of playful creativity quickly spiraled into something far more troubling. Auden, burdened by confusion and fear, often uttered, "I don't like this play," his little face etched with worry, but Uncle Frank's reassuring words silenced his doubts. "Don't worry, Auden. With time, you will come to enjoy this play," Uncle Frank coaxed, gradually implanting his twisted ideas into Auden's malleable mind. As days turned into weeks, Auden's focus shifted from his studies to these encounters. He found himself daydreaming about Uncle Frank during class, counting the hours until he could run into his arms after school. Meanwhile, Mr. and Mrs. Jabari, basking in the glow of their son's affection for Uncle Frank, paid little attention to the changes in Aden. They believed Uncle Frank was helping their son grow. After all, Aden had a tutor now, did he not? Their caring nature led them to increase Uncle Frank's monthly salary, not suspecting that their trust was misplaced. One morning, Mrs. Jabari couldn't shake the worry gnawing at her heart. Deeply troubled, she resolved to speak to Uncle Frank. "I really don't know what's going on. Aden's teacher has been complaining that he seems distracted in class. He listens to you more than he does to us. You have nothing to worry about, Mrs. Jabari. That's why I'm here. I promise Aden will turn over a new leaf," he assured her. Later that day, Uncle Frank confronted Aden with a serious expression that the boy had rarely seen. "What's going on, Aden? Your mom mentioned you aren't concentrating in class anymore. School is boring. I just want to stay home with you. If you want me to stay here with you, then you have to start performing well. If not, your mother might begin to suspect something's wrong. You know your performance in class reflects on me as your tutor too." Determined to regain his footing, Aden began to study harder in school, buoyed by Uncle Frank's assurance. To Aden's relief, Uncle Frank limited their secretive playtime to twice a week, dedicating the rest of their sessions to serious subjects, mathematics, chemistry, and physics, in which Uncle Frank excelled. As the weeks turned into months, Aden flourished, graduating into junior secondary school with flying colors. Mr. and Mrs. Jabari, oblivious to the complexities of Aden's relationship with Uncle Frank, felt proud of their son's achievement and generously increased Uncle Frank's salary yet again. However, Uncle Frank's attachment to Aden had morphed into an unspoken bond that consumed his life. Despite Aden blossoming into a handsome teenager, sought after by many girls, he remained oblivious to their affections, fixated solely on Uncle Frank. While other boys basked in the thrill of young love, Aden's world revolved around a single relationship. As time passed, Uncle Frank's mother began to express her concerns. "Since I know you and people have been talking that they've never seen you with any woman, are you planning on becoming a reverend father?" "I haven't found the right person yet," he replied. Aden had recently graduated from secondary school with outstanding grades. His parents wanted him to study medicine and become a doctor, just like them. However, Aden had vowed never to become a doctor, having witnessed its effects on his family when he was younger. One evening, during a family dinner where Uncle Frank was present, Aden announced, "I'm going to study theater art in Lagos State University." Mr. and Mrs. Jabari were shocked by this declaration. "You studied so hard and came top of your class. You're pretty intelligent. Why would you settle for something so ordinary?" Aden remained resolute. "I just love art, and I will do what I love. You would listen to your mother. Love doesn't put food on anyone's table. We work day and night so you could have the best education," Aden retorted. "And that's why I never want to be like you," before storming out of the dining room in anger. Uncle Frank observed the unfolding events, witnessing the tension between Aden and his parents. Mrs. Jabari whispered to him, "Talk to him, he'll listen to you." Aden, now 18, and Uncle Frank would often spend time together, going on outings that appeared to be innocent to others. They would go to the cinema, parties, and shopping, enjoying alone time when Mr. and Mrs. Jabari were not around. One day, Uncle Frank called Aden for a private conversation. "Your mom is really worried about your choice of career. Please, I want you to reconsider art. It was a childhood dream, but you're not a child anymore." Aden was taken aback by Frank's suggestion. "So you want me to leave you and go study abroad?" "Exactly what I'm saying. You'll eventually have to leave me. I'm your cousin. There's no future for us together. My mother has begun to question things, and eyes are on me." He had fallen in love with Frank, the only love he had ever known. And now, those words shattered his heart as tears rolled down his cheeks. "What do you mean I'll have to eventually leave you? If you knew you weren't going to love me forever, why did you let me fall for you all my life?" Frank had never understood the depth of Aden's feelings until that moment. Seeing Aden in tears broke Frank's resolve. Realizing how damaging his life choices had been, especially for a young boy like Aden, filled with dreams, he recognized he should have ended things before it escalated. Without saying a word, Frank stood up and left the mansion. The following morning, Frank returned to the mansion to gather his belongings and leave for good. But as he was about to exit, Auden emerged and caught him from behind. "Please don't do this, Uncle Frank. I love you so much. I can't live without you. Please let it go. This can't work. Do you know what your parents will do if they find out? There's no us, can't you see? We're in Africa. Our type of relationship is a taboo. Then let's leave together. I could study theater arts abroad, and we could be together there." As Frank turned to go, Auden felt his heart breaking. Mr. and Mrs. Jabari couldn't comprehend why Uncle Frank left without notice, but they were grateful for his presence throughout their only son's childhood. Auden was heartbroken for days, losing his appetite and crying continuously. After Uncle Frank left the mansion, Mrs. Jabari observed that her son had become increasingly introverted. He no longer smiled as often, nor did he go out as he used to. One day, unable to bear the pain any longer, Auden discovered where Uncle Frank was living through his parents and decided to pay him a visit. When Frank opened the door and saw Auden, shock flickered across his face. He instinctively tried to keep Auden outside, but then his fiancée, Amara, emerged asking who it was. Frank quickly introduced Auden, attempting to keep the conversation brief. "What is wrong with you, Auden? Why can't you just grow up and stop being stubborn? You're a very smart boy. How come this is so difficult for you to understand?" Auden tried to speak, but Frank cut him off. "We can't have this conversation out here. I'll come see you so we can talk about this properly." Auden left Frank's place with the hope that he would keep his promise, yearning to express how deeply he was hurting. But Frank never came. A week passed as Frank's wedding approached, and he neither visited nor answered Auden's calls. It was finally Frank's wedding day, and Mr. and Mrs. Jabari were invited as special guests. "Auden, we're ready. Come on, we're going to be late." However, Auden appeared unprepared, still wearing his nighties. "I'm not feeling well. Just take care of yourself," Mr. Jabari said, walking away. Frank's wedding was the biggest event in town, attended by many influential people, including the Jabaris, who took front row seats as special guests. Frank looked incredibly happy as he watched Amara walking down the aisle, tears streaming down his face in sheer joy. This heartfelt moment was streamed live across social media, and Auden, watching from home, became overwhelmed with fury. Restless and delusional, he began kicking things around the house. In a fit of rage, Auden broke into his father's room, accessed the safe, and took his father's licensed gun. He then jumped into one of the cars in the house and headed toward the wedding venue. Storming into the reception hall without a mask or any thought for the consequences, Auden fired the gun into the air, causing immediate panic as everyone dropped to the floor for safety. Among the chaos, Frank and Amara were both shocked to see Auden brandishing the weapon. Without a word, Auden aimed at Frank, but the bullet struck Amara instead. Before he could pull the trigger again, armed police guards at the wedding tased him, bringing him to the ground. Chaos erupted throughout the venue as Mr. and Mrs. Jabari witnessed their son being handcuffed by Nigerian police. In sheer disbelief, they struggled to comprehend the harrowing scene unfolding before their eyes.